What's up, guys? Good to have you here. Mash the button. Just mash it. Subscribe. Give us some love. Okay, what the freak is codependency? So you guys have been asking for it, and now we're going to deliver. Today's the day you're going to find out.
First, let's start with a review from one of you. It's over on iTunes. It's called Essential Self-Care. I believe an essential step to self-care is self-discovery. This podcast has opened my eyes to so much of that. All three have so many different insights, not limited to the betrayed, the addicted, or the expert, that anyone can come and partake in its aid to self-discovery. Thank you for helping my recovery.
Awesome.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for leaving us a review too.
Yeah.
So I want to just share a little bit about our history, our background. I mean, we talk about the microphone on the ironing board a lot, but I want to back up just a little bit. And I when I got into this years ago, I was trained in a couple different models, and I was doing the best that I could, and I was specializing in sex addiction, betrayal, trauma, and I started to realize that a lot of the stuff I was doing wasn't working, and the people that I was being trained by really didn't actually know what they were doing. And it really showed to me how new the field is of treatment for betrayal, trauma, sex addiction. And so I learned a lot of what not to do. And there's a real process for me to understand what is helpful for recovery, both for the person struggling with addiction and for the betrayed. And about the time when I started to really piece it together, I feel like, and really understand what's helpful for real recovery, is when I met Coby. And I was teaching this foundations group and Foundations of Recovery group, and I had put together all of my stuff that I felt like was very helpful. And Coby showed up in that group, and that's where I met you.
Totally was.
And Coby at the time was ripe for recovery. He was a golden contact, so to speak. He was ready to go. Because and that was a process to get to that point.
Oh, was it?
But at that time, you were open, you were willing, you were humble, you were hungry for change, and you were there working on it for you.
Yep.
And so it was good to work with you in that group. And you guys started in on the recovery process and shared your story publicly, and it really went kind of viral. And as that was happening, I was just thinking about, like, how can we spread this message of real recovery further than just this foundations group that I'm running, further than sitting one-on-one in my office. And I was sitting in my kitchen one night, and it just hit me, like, I gotta text Coby and say, hey, we need to do a podcast. Now, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, like, you have to get a microphone.
Yeah, I didn't know
talk
what that meant.
to or anything like that. But and we figured it out one step at a time, as our audience can tell by the way our audio gets better and better as we go.
We're still working on that for
Yep.
YouTubers.
Yeah. But it's been an awesome journey, and the reviews and the feedback that we get, and just the lives that we touch, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for just God leading us into this, and I'm grateful for the opportunity we have to be a support and a guide along the way for people. And so that's really our story, how this all developed. Did you guys?
I want to just add, I met Brannon the day we first recorded the very first episode.
Yeah.
I didn't even know Brannon.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hi, nice to meet you. Let's get vulnerable.
And record.
I actually really appreciate Coby, because I was like, hey, Coby, let's do this podcast. And I went over to your guys' house to set up the ironing board. And he's like, yeah, Ashlynn's doing it with us for sure. like that. I don't know if you really even asked me. It was just like, that's happening.
Yeah, I was like convinced, like, dude, we're crazy if we think anybody's gonna listen to just the two of us.
Absolutely.
Because Ashlynn has a legit story to tell, and she needs to be involved in like representing the perspective of the betrayed in all of this. And you've been a rock star.
Well, and I will say this: sometimes, two things. People say Ashlynn's too quiet. Well, guess what? This is me actually not being quiet.
Yeah.
I've come out of my shell a little bit, but I'm standing next to two people who are very extroverted
Right.
and have more to say than me. I also never in a million years thought my voice would be out there, just my voice, because I struggled my whole life with knowing I had a lisp. And so for me, like, it's a big deal that I am choosing to say, hey, this is me. And I have a lisp, and maybe you guys didn't notice before, and now it's all you hear, and you're like, dang her. But there you go. It's a big deal for me.
I love it.
So,
I just love, you guys have really taken the brunt of being vulnerable. I mean, I haven't. I'm more the expert guy on the side, and so you talk about your lisp, and I just love it. And I think that's why it works, is because we're authentic, we're real, and that's how we get down to the real topics. And I sure appreciate our audience, and we couldn't have built this to where it is today. We're almost at 50,000 downloads or something like that without them, and them leaving reviews, them sharing it with their friends, talking about it in their 12-step groups. A lot of our listeners share it with their therapists. I hear from other therapists that are like, yeah, my client told me they've been listening to you guys. So really appreciate you guys as well.
So we know that you love the podcast, those of you who are listening, and we appreciate you listening. Whether this is your first time listening to us or you've been here from the go, we just want you to know that we're grateful for you being here. And but we do know that you have been asking for more. You've been wanting something that's like, give me a step-by-step. How do I do this? And, for those of you who have been stuck, which I was stuck forever.
we both were.
Yeah. It's like, how do we shortcut being stuck? How do we get around that? Not that we want to skip some steps, but how do we streamline the process? And
really, it's what you guys wanted when you started in on this whole journey, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Really, our journey has been kind of like pig trail. Like, we're just kind of like, oh yeah, let's do this thing, and oh, let's do this thing, and oh, that totally worked. And so we spent the summer, coming together, saying, hey, let's figure this out and make it work. How we've done the process, and how Brannon, pull that in and say, these are the best steps to take.
Absolutely.
To really find hope and healing. And
so we have this program that's it's a comprehensive program that is doable and works for couples. The name of the program is Shattered to Thriving, but it also works for individuals. If you want to get in there, you're doing your hard work, maybe you're about to get divorced, it's still helpful for you to get it. It's a lot more. It's the podcast, we talk about topics. That program's about transformation. So it's taking you from one place to another, and it really creates a shift, and it's awesome.
That's what we're hoping to help facilitate for all of you, because again, it's the three of us we've just realized that there is a better way to cause a shift. And with the years that Ashlynn, you've spent mentoring, and the time that I put in mentoring, and the extensive time, Brannon, that you've treated, it's just together we've put this together. We put this all in a program that legit, I think back to when we first started, it's like, oh my gosh, had we only had this, this would have helped guide us.
That program, we talk about things, and I say things in there that I say every single day to my clients, day in and day out. And they pay me one session at a time, and they meet with me, every week.
So they have to come and sit on your couch. They have to live here in Utah, and not everyone has that.
And they have to wait every week to talk through these topics. Whereas this is packaged up. It's something like 20 hours of content. It's a lot of good content. It's cheaper than doing that much therapy. And so we've put it in there. You guys have thrown your expertise in the mix. I've thrown mine in, and it's awesome. I'm so excited.
We really
about
just
it.
like hold your hand through the process of, again, going from shattered trust to thriving intimacy. And man, had we had this, Ash, when we started,
it's funny because we would record. It's a video and audio, and then there's worksheets, homework, things like that, right? Go at your own pace. But when we would finish these recordings, and I'm like, yes, like I want to do this. It felt so good. Like I love this.
Yes.
So if it's exciting me, I think that's a big deal, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm excited because it does launch today. It's the first ever, and because of that, we're giving it to you guys half off for 1 week. So it starts today, August 13th, and it's going to go for the week. And so if you go to shatteredtothriving.com, you can jump on and get that. Last time we opened this up, just for the beta group, it sold out in 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, don't wait till next Tuesday. Jump on.
Yep. Guys, again, we appreciate you being here and listening, and we get you, we understand you. Although there's variations with stories, you guys have been here, and we want nothing more than just to help. This is gonna, we believe, help streamline the process and get you unstuck.
Yes, no matter where you're at, beginning
where
or
you're
the
at.
middle, or even close to the end of recovery. I mean, there's no end. Look at us. But okay, so speaking of our audience, we had somebody reach out saying, hey, earlier this year you guys talked a tiny bit of codependency in an episode, and then you never like followed it up with what you said you would, like a whole podcast. So I'm ready. Give it to me.
So what the freak is codependency? Honestly, I asked that question at the beginning of the episode, and I'm like,
but really,
when I first heard it, I was like, this is like Greek. It's so clinical. Like, what does this even mean?
So I could see certain people, pulling up our podcast and seeing the title, what the freak is codependency, and them cringing a little bit. Like, why are they still talking about codependency? Codependency is the old model. It's not helpful. It's not useful. In fact, it's destructive to talk about it.
So say why, because I didn't know this. This is not how I came into recovery.
Hold on, it's destructive to talk about it, but in what context, Brannon?
Yeah,
because it's relative for me now, but in relationship to this whole arena, how is it? How is it that way?
I actually think codependency is very important to understand and talk about, and both parties are usually codependent. But let me explain. So, and we've talked about this before, but when I first started in getting trained, there was this model of codependency or co-addict, and what that meant was a couple would come into treatment, and they would say to the spouse, they would say, you're codependent, you're enabling their addiction, and almost blame them some. Not almost blame them some for the addiction, and it kind of sent the spouse spinning a little bit of, look, I'm in a lot of pain, I'm confused, I'm crazy making here, and now I go to therapy and I'm being told that it's all my fault. Not very helpful, and so they needed some validation in their pain. They needed to understand that they've been in a relationship that's full of a lot of gaslighting and crazy making. And so that shifted. Some things happened, and this betrayal trauma term came out. And betrayal trauma went pretty far in saying, look, it's not codependency, you have betrayal trauma. And what that did is it validated the spouse. It made them feel, I've been hurt. I've experienced all these different forms of trauma within this betrayal trauma, and I can put words to it, and it's really helpful to not be blamed and to be validated in my pain. So that was, I believe, a step in the right direction. However, codependency is still a real thing. And so,
but it's more like a part of the process, not just the label of what it is. Yes?
Kind of. So, like, let's define codependency right now. So, codependency is when you basically lack boundaries and you give your power away to somebody else. It's when you don't know where you stop and they begin. So you're overly attached to somebody, you're enmeshed, and you, on an emotional level, you know, if they're sad or angry or whatever, you can't handle that, or you're always trying to please them, always trying to make things right in the relationship. So you have a hard time being authentic and being honest and being real and being grounded and being boundaried in that relationship, because the relationship holds way too much weight. So that's what codependency is. And codependency are the symptoms of unhealthy attachment. Independency can be a symptom of unhealthy attachment as well. Codependency is over-attaching, independency is under-attaching. And so it's a real thing, and it's really helpful. It's helpful for me to say, okay, where am I codependent to my wife? Where do I have a hard time with my boundaries? Where do I have a hard time, dealing with certain emotions that she has or whatever? It's helpful for me to reflect on that. So this bringing betrayal trauma into the equation, I believe, does not mean that codependency is not a real thing. But saying the codependency is the reason why the enabling of the addiction has happened, I don't believe in that either. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ash, what would be some what would be some real life examples for you and I of how codependency has shown up as you just off the top of your head?
For me, I think immediately the if mom isn't happy, nobody's happy.
Yeah.
And it's that. And so when I
Totally.
was mad or sad or happy, so were you.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's interesting because I had a funky day yesterday. Just like everything was just kind of off, and for no reason, just like, I don't feel great today. And Coby still had a great day, and it's like we can be separate now.
Yes.
And he doesn't have to come down and be like, oh, we're sad today. Okay.
Yeah.
You know? And
If you're in a relationship with a codependent person, there's a lot of pressure there, and it's tiring and draining. You feel consumed all the time, like you're being used, because your well-being really matters to that person so
Yeah.
much.
it almost feels like a game. It felt like a game because he would show up one way, and then I would have to play my game of like, okay, so this is what we're doing. This is the dance.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's keep doing it. And it took so much brain power for me to be like, oh wait, we're mad, remember?
Right.
Instead of just, like you said, showing up as, hey,
Vulnerable and authentic.
yeah, I feel good, and I'm sorry you don't feel good today. That type of thing. I feel codependency with a sister,
Mm-hmm.
one of my sisters, and I hate it because I'll think, oh, I've done so good, I've gotten out of codependency, but then she'll do one thing and I'm like, oh, it's still there. What,
Right.
and it's frustrating
But
for me.
what's the effect for you when a comment is thrown out, even in a text?
It just
What's the
eats
response
me,
and effect for you?
it eats me up, and it goes to that narrative that's like the broken record, and I'm trying to like analyze and all these, and instead of just like, okay, like,
Right.
why am I letting this bother me?
Well, and I think that's a great question. Like, what is underneath the codependent behaviors? And if you're acting codependent, then you're trying to use that person for something, and
Like
so
validation.
yeah. So if you're looking at why do I struggle with codependency, chances are you really struggle with your own self-worth. And then you look at why do I struggle with my own self-worth, and you can probably find some trauma somewhere.
Oh yeah, and
Right.
and it's super clear for me in that relationship, the self-worth. Yes, like I want my big sister to give me validation,
To like
say I'm
me,
awesome.
right? Yes.
And so yeah, I super see it there. And Coby and I, yeah, when I started to learn about it, it was like, oh yeah, it's showing up all over the place, and it was showing up as we parented. With the way our children showed up, it was like we reacted instead of
Yes.
responded. And
Yes. Yeah.
When this is a really funny little example of it, but when I was a kid, and my mom was like super codependent, right? My dad was too, but my mom was super codependent, and when she would get mad at us for whatever, my dad was just like the typical like, quiet. And then, Craig, I can't believe you're not. And he's, oh yeah, kids. And then all of a sudden, Dad got mad. Right?
He'd kick into gear.
And the truth is he could have cared less about what she was doing. I mean, it wasn't important to him. But what was important to him was that he didn't make waves by saying, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Another example of this is super funny. I don't know why this keeps repeating in my head. Harry Potter, Chamber of Secrets. The beginning of the show, Ron Weasley and his older twin brothers go get Harry out of his house at his aunt and uncle's house, and they fly home in this car, and they get there, and Mom, they all sit around the breakfast table, and Mrs. Weasley says, boys, you drove the car? I can't believe you. You could have been caught. And Mr. Weasley comes in and says, oh my gosh, you flew the car? How was it? Was it amazing? What was it like? And she's like, and then Mrs. Weasley like freaks out at Mr. Weasley. And he, oh, boys, that was very wrong of you indeed, and you should not have.
He totally changed.
He totally changed.
Yes.
It's hilarious. So for those of you who are like Harry Potter lovers, you'll get what I'm saying. But that's an example of how Mr. Weasley was codependent and allowed Mrs. Weasley's emotions and her boundary of like, I don't like the boys driving the car, flying the car, and he was cool with it, but he gave his own boundary of like, yeah, it's cool if you fly the car.
I think you're identifying a real sign of codependency, which is
the flying car.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
and being a Harry Potter nerd, not that either.
Hey, much love to all of you
Just
who
so
are.
you know, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Not that that's a bad thing.
I'm not a Harry Potter fan.
I feel bad for both of you.
But what it is going everywhere the wind blows you in terms of your truth.
Yeah.
You know, if your spouse walks in and says, no, I actually want it this way, and you're like, oh, so do I. Or your friend says, I want to go to dinner here, and you're thinking, I really don't want to go there. But you're
I
like,
hate that place.
Yeah, I totally would love to go there. You're avoiding uncomfortableness in that relationship at the expense of you.
Yep.
And when you do that, you're giving your power to them. And so
it can be done subtly. Super subtly.
It can be done automatically.
Yeah.
And you might be so comfortable being codependent that you've done it for so long that actually speaking up or being honest is going to be really hard for you, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting you say in the term of food, because that
Holy
makes so much
cow.
sense to me, of like, especially dealing with a daughter with food allergies. If she doesn't have boundaries and stand up for herself, she's going to go somewhere and get sick.
She better, right?
Yeah.
She needs
Or,
That's interesting.
or not eat because there's nothing to eat. No one provided
Yeah.
for me. So,
Yeah.
holy cow. So, it sounds like it can show up in so many different areas of our life.
Another way to look at it is drama. So if you're playing the victim a lot, you're codependent. So somebody does something, you then give them your power, and you wallow around and wait for them to change, and they better make it all right. Then you have handed it over now, right? Being a caretaker is classic codependency, or a rescuer, where hey, I want to fix it. I want to tell people what to do and make them feel good, or I want to cook them a good dinner so that they feel
Give
good.
advice where advice has not been asked.
Throw advice in it, and then when they don't reciprocate with, oh my gosh, you're amazing, you then go to the victim. You know, you're codependently doing those nice things. You're consuming that person for your self-worth. You're not just doing them out of love. So, you know, you're trying to use them. So another one is to be the persecutor. When you get really angry or violent or swear and yell at people, things that you normally wouldn't, but their emotions or their actions set you off, then you've given up your power to them.
That's the piece right there that just burned me. When I finally understood exactly what you just explained. For instance, my girls would say something and I'd just lose my mind. I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so codependent, and I was just pissed that I gave the power of my emotions to a 5-year-old to determine how I feel, and I was just like out of my mind, furious about it, and from that point, Ashlyn's laughing because I read Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. and it was a great book, and it was a very clear illustrator as to how I acted, but moreover how I get out of that. And anyways, the point with it is now, like since that moment, I have accounted every night when I check in, and I still check in every night, because it's that evaluation is super important for me, because I can see the moments in my day where I felt the pull of codependency, like, ooh, like that was really hard to hear them say that, and I wanted to react, but I didn't. So what do I do? I say I evaluate if I felt the pull of it and if I gave into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And giving into it is like, not being authentic to me and not keeping my boundaries. And one of them is like I'm not gonna allow my 9-year-old Ellie, my redhead, to make me lose my mind. Like
Right.
I'm not gonna give her the power, and that doesn't always work.
Can I
actually.
point something out? You are accounting for things every day that, yes, they're part of recovery, but it's not keeping you from relapse. Like it's more like, hey, I'm trying to show up as a good human here,
Yeah. Yes.
and I'm trying to be my best self, and this is self-reflection every day. And I'm a huge believer, self-reflection is a superpower.
Absolutely.
So I
Seriously.
just want to give you props, because I want you guys to listen and hear. He's not, I mean, he's still checking in for recovery stuff, but he's added to it, because
Yes.
there's
Oh
so
my
much more to this.
Yes, it's not just about whether or not you touch
Touch
your
my penis?
for the day.
Yeah.
It's your recovery is about so much more.
Indeed.
The
so,
doing.
So there's this thing that happens. A telltale sign of codependency is resentment. So if you have a lot of
Yes.
resentment toward other people, then you're probably pretty codependent. And what happens is somebody who recognizes this and are ready for change, they're like, okay, screw this. Like, I'm not going to be codependent anymore. And they swing the pendulum to the other side.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it's like, you know what? I'm boundaried now. So watch it. Yeah, like boom, here I am. Like, I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about you. I care about number one.
Coby did a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I did a lot of it of that. Let's
Yeah.
just be honest.
So, and it can be a correction thing where you swing so far to the other side, you go independent. You disconnect from their feelings, from so that you can then show up powerfully.
It's like giving the
enough.
emotional finger to somebody to say, yeah, I don't care where you are, what you're doing, I'm gonna do me.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's like, I almost feel like that way is when you really have to say, these are my boundaries, and you're like physically telling someone. Whereas when you're more interdependent and you're in the
Yes.
middle, it's like, I'm just living
That's
my
a great
boundaries.
point, Ashlynn. You don't have to. Now maybe swinging the pendulum that way is good for you because it's part of the process of not being codependent anymore. But a healthy person is interdependent. They're in the middle where what that means is they're affected by other people.
Mhm.
They're connected.
They can feel the steam,
They're
the
connected.
pain.
There's emotion there, and there's intimacy and connection. But at the same time, they know where they stop and the other person begins, so that they can be connected to them. They can feel their emotions, but they can still be authentically boundaried in that relationship.
Okay, can I give you a dumb example, but real, very real for me? So social media, that's where we run our business, right?
Right.
So we get some messages every once in a while that are very
Gotta love the haters.
harsh,
Yeah.
very harsh. And I hate when I see like, words don't hurt me. Like I have so much self-love that
Right.
it's okay, and then blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but they still hurt me.
Right.
And so those words that I get, I may not respond. I choose to do what I do, but it still affects me for a moment, and I have to work through that
Yes.
to not be codependent to the stranger on the internet.
But because they hurt you doesn't mean you're codependent.
Right.
Now, if you wallow for 3 days because you got this one bad message and you shut your life down and
Which-
can't handle it,
Well, I'll be
that's
honest.
an extreme example.
It's happened.
Yeah. So
I've told you, Brannon.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
like, I'm so
Yes.
mad. Why is this bugging me?
and that's more codependent behavior, right? You're giving that power away, as opposed to getting real with yourself of, ouch, that hurts. Now I have responsibility to do what I want with that.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting perspective on this, and I just wanted to share this. A lot of guys that I work with are codependent with their partner, with their kids, with family members, but if you put them in the workplace, they are not codependent
Yes.
at all, and don't, in a very effective way, give the power of their emotions to a client, a coworker, a boss, to determine how they feel.
Yep.
It's super, super interesting. And again, that is an example. Like if I sell cars, and or Johnny Lunchbucket sells cars, and he has somebody who walks out on a deal that he's been working on for like 2 weeks, and yeah, he's upset that the deal's lost, but he's like, forget you guys, I'm not going to give you any space in my head. I got to move forward with the next one.
Release.
Right? That is, there are more. My experience has been that there are more people who are like that, who are interdependent at work or in other recreational relationships or environments than they are at home. And that's one of the reasons why it's possible to change this, because you're already exercising interdependence in other arenas in life. You just have to learn how to be able to do that.
But it
in your
takes,
relationships.
It takes facing your biggest fears. So I'm glad you brought this up. I could be completely codependent with my boss and interdependent with my wife.
True.
But my boss represents something to me that he holds some of my biggest fears there. I'm afraid of authority, or I want to be liked by somebody who pays me, or I don't know what it is, So in order for me to then be boundaried with him, I'm going to have to really dig deep, self-reflect, and say, what is it about me that I can't be boundaried there, that I can't be authentic in that relationship? Now, codependency with a spouse is probably the most common thing that happens. And one thing I did want to talk about was sex addiction. It's interesting that back in the day that the couple would come in and they'd say to the spouse, "You're such a codependent," because the fact of the matter is, of the two, the sex addict is probably the most codependent.
Totally.
Because they've been living in so much shame. They have all the makings of codependency. They've been living in shame. They've been living in secrecy, but sex in and of itself can be used in a very codependent way, and they've probably been acting out, trying to feel a void and feel desirable,
feel better,
or feel powerful, or whatever it is. And so sex in a relationship, sex can show codependency so much. There's so much codependent sex happening out there that's destroying relationships. It's doing harm to relationships where you're using each other instead of loving each other in the bedroom. So
Okay, how do we get out of this, Brannon?
You go to Shattered to Thriving and check out our program.
Okay, that's true.
But we have module 2 in that program that is all about healthy boundaries. And when I say healthy boundaries, there's so much more than, let me give you the list of the things that work for me and the things that don't. It's really understanding what it takes to be an authentic, genuine, honest person. And when you understand what that looks like, then that's just the first step. The next step is to actually go practice that over and over again, and you'll realize, oh my gosh, I'm not going to die if people don't like what I say, or I'm not going to, the world won't end if somebody's uncomfortable about something that I did. And that's really the way out, is some consistent acts of courage. Mindfulness of your behaviors. I think every time we do these, we're like, okay, step number 1, mindfulness.
But
Totally.
it's true. It's so dumb. And that's one of the things. We went to that mindfulness course like a year and a half into recovery, 2 years. But that was like, why didn't we get introduced to this sooner? Because, wow.
But it's such a
work.
critical piece to recovery, because once a principle is introduced to you and you see how it is manifested in your life, as long as you can account for that specific principle every day and be mindful, even if it's momentarily, that will allow you to make corrections.
You can't account for it when you're in the limbic system. So when you're in your emotional mind, just off the rails, it's hard to
totally
stop
agree.
and say. So, what both of you
Hence
guys
the check-in,
what both
though.
of you guys are saying is absolutely right. Learn how to be mindful of when you get codependent. So the answer isn't stop being codependent. The answer is to become self-reflective and aware, and then mindful that that's happening.
Curious.
And then step into that courage and those healthy boundaries.
Yeah, a real critical piece for me in working on codependency with Ashlynn was chapter 5 in Codependent No More, which is called Disconnection. And I was like, I don't even like disconnection. What does that
How
have
do
to
I do that?
But I was like, what does this even mean?
It's the where do I end when you begin.
And even still, I have a hard time even just hearing that real time right now.
Okay.
Like, where do I end and she begins? I don't get it.
Anyway.
So the point with this is disconnection, very simply stated, is when I'm in a place where I'm really feeling the pull of codependency, then I'm going to say, okay, this conversation is not productive for me anymore, and I'm going to stop, and we're going to end this. And I learned also that sometimes the person that you're trying to stop the conversation with doesn't like that at all.
Sometimes they badger you.
Yes, and so you have to
That'd be me.
leave the room or whatever. And so there was
We
two.
do it sometimes
I know.
to each other.
Well, that's true, but I had 2 real experiences with this early in recovery, and one was driving in the car near my 40th birthday. It was my And anyways, we're driving along
I
the
give
15.
him the best 40th
Totally.
birthday ever.
And Ashlynn got really triggered about how I ate rubbish on this little road trip, and just started getting after me in the car while we're driving, and I couldn't get out of the situation. I was like, Ashlynn, we're done. I'm not talking about this. And so the more I tried to stop it, the higher Ashlynn's volume got, and the more intense she got. And
Happy birthday.
I know, right? But this is just real life living, and we've got no shame about this now. But the point is that I learned, okay, when Ashlynn raises her voice and yells or calls me names, I am going to disconnect the conversation. And I use that term, I'm disconnecting this conversation, and it's done. It's not productive anymore. This isn't okay with me. And there was a second time that happened in the house where I had to literally just walk out of the room and turn my back to her.
Right.
And to be clear, when we're doing this and practicing it, yes, it is a practice to pull out of those moments. We always come back to it. So
Right.
we're not just
Totally,
ignoring
yes.
it like our old path.
For sure, but it's me. That's an example of me saying, it doesn't work for me to be called a name or to be yelled at. So I'm going to stop this conversation. I'm going to disconnect this conversation.
You're going to go a little more independent.
Exactly, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to have this conversation right now. We can circle back to it later, but I'm done right now.
Yeah.
And to me, once I understood once I had a real life example of how to actually disconnect, it was like, okay, now I understand that I can say, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, and when that's not honored in any relationship, in any conversation, I can say, yeah, I'm actually going to stop this because that's not working for me.
Right, that's a boundary.
That's totally
Yes.
a boundary.
Yep. That's the way out of codependency.
Yeah.
Is to learn how to actually do that.
And that's super hard.
But it's
But
possible.
but it's
like
totally
the
possible.
example you gave, that's doable for everyone listening today.
Yeah.
It just takes the strength and the awareness to say, I can actually
Yep.
show up and choose how my life turns out.
I mean, codependency or getting over it really is starting to value, and this might sound, this really is the paradox to it all. You value yourself more than the relationship, so then you can have a really awesome, healthy relationship. Another paradox is this, you need to, and I'd say most of the couples listening probably struggle with some codependency. You need to detach so that then you can really experience some good intimacy and love in your relationship. So you detangle, you actually separate some so that you can really love each other. And so, but that's uncomfortable. You've been using each other for a long time. So I challenge you to, if you're listening as a couple, for each of you to practice having one boundary with your spouse this week. And hopefully as the spouse, you can take a step back and say, oh, I appreciate what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. This isn't what we normally do, but
Yeah.
thank you. We're changing this.
Well, and it's exactly what you said, Brannon. When we would start to step into those roles, and we were pretty open and honest with each other, like, hey, I'm going to work on this.
Totally.
And own our stuff.
And we're like,
right?
please, Coby, work on this.
No, but it was
We
like,
both were.
I knew I was a name caller. I knew I did all these things. And so I had to own that and say, okay, I'm going to work
I
on
so
this.
can't see you as a name.
I
What,
know.
like, did you call him a douchebag, or what'd you call him?
No, he came up with that one on his own.
Yeah, that was
I-
a self-imposed
I've never been a
title.
swearing kind of girl, so just mean names, I guess. I don't even know.
Like jerk or whatever.
No, it was
Anyways,
like
you don't
really
have to tell me.
harsh, like idiot.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I'm a
just,
5-year-old.
I'm just curious.
No, I mean
It's really irrelevant.
Had you sworn, I think it would
It would've
have
meant
made it
more.
funny. Yeah, actually.
just
but,
not my thing.
Yeah.
So I had to own that stuff, so we would talk about it. But
Yep.
then when we actually did it, like, these are the things we want. I want you to show up as strong and
Yeah.
and not this, like, do whatever I say. But it still bothered me because
Yes.
it was proof to me that I wasn't showing up how I wanted to show up.
Yeah.
And so it is uncomfortable, but that's
it's growth.
good. Like,
That's growth.
that discomfort is like, oh, we're doing
Yeah.
this.
And I will to that point. It felt damn good when I showed up and I said
Do you like how he swears?
yes.
Just for
but
me.
but it really did though. That's not for you, but it was for me because remember how I said I just it burned me to realize how codependent I was.
Yeah.
When I actually kept my boundaries, it was like
It's empowering.
It does
feels
feel
good.
Yeah.
It is empowering.
And scary. It feels like scary. Like,
Are
oh
they
my gosh,
going
what am
to
I doing?
accept me?
Heck yeah, I'm being powerful
Exactly.
and honest. Yeah.
I'm stepping up as a powerful man to say, this all stops now.
And let's be honest, most of the women out here that's what they want, is they want a man who's strong
Absolutely.
and who loves themselves and believes they're worthy of having boundaries.
And the men, I know I want my wife to be strong. I want her to be honest. I want her to be her and not who she thinks I need her to be. So either way, when you show up in your power and you show up authentic, you're attractive. And
It's totally
and
true.
it's awesome when both people in a relationship are doing that.
It's a big deal. So this is codependency, right? So hopefully we've answered the question what the freak is codependency. But again, guys, this topic is addressed in module 2 of the program that we just developed, and that's all an effort to give you guys what you've wanted, which is, hey, give us more. We want to be unstuck because stuff is just really, really hard. We want a step-by-step guide on how to do this. And we want to get your advice. We want to get your experience. We want to tap into what you guys have done. And that's why we have created this program, from shattered trust to thriving intimacy. And this is all the stuff. Codependency, this topic, I ache thinking back to when we first started therapy that we could have had this.
And
I
this
wish we could
program
have.
isn't the old way 10 years ago.
No.
We're going to help you get uncodependent and blah, blah, blah. It's not that.
It's actually like less
The
labels.
program's not about codependency.
No.
Yeah.
Module 2 addresses it.
It's about trust,
But there's-
safety,
yeah.
authenticity, and overcoming addiction and betrayal trauma.
There's some really cool stuff in there too, because there's a part where Ashlynn and I, not in module 2, but where Brannon leads us through processing ourselves on a specific topic, and we really do it real time and just as authentically as you hear us now. But you'll see us show up in different ways than we've ever showed up on the podcast.
Brannon actually did that with some of our beta users as well,
Yeah.
which was kind of cool
Yeah.
to see live with not just us,
Yeah.
Other people as well. So this is for anyone. We had some people in our beta group who were well into recovery, who still learned some new things, and who went a little backwards to say, hey, we missed this part.
Yeah.
Let's do this part. So it's really for all of you who are listening.
So shatteredtothriving.com. Go check it out.
Live today.
And for 1 week, Ashlynn, what's the deal for 1 week?
Half off just for you, because we love you.
Okay, guys, thanks for being here. We will see you again soon.
See you guys.